Welcome to the Constitutional Candidate Series from the Political Media Studios. I'm Larry Ward. I'm the chairman of the Constitutional Rights PAC. What is the Constitutional Candidate Series, and why are we doing this? Well, we've researched and selected a group of constitutional candidates that we believe, if elected, will uphold their oath of office and defend the Bill of Rights and defend the Constitution of America. I've been in DC politics for over 20 years, and I thought it's time to change the game. Let me explain. There are groups that candidates go to for money, and they ask for support financially. They ask for support. They ask for the endorsement of these groups to help them win election. And in these sessions with these candidates and these organizations, they're behind closed doors, right? And you've got groups like the Club for Growth, the Heritage Action, the Senate Conservatives Fund, and our PAC, like Constitutional Rights PAC, and we ask them questions. We ask them questions about what their issues are, how they're going to vote when they become a member of Congress. We ask them questions about how they're going to win, how their fundraising is going, how their ground game looks, so that we know, as an organization, whether or not it's worthy to invest in them. But it's time to change that because it's not our money. All of our organizations that I listed above, and quite frankly, every organization that's out there, political organization, is funded by you. It's funded by donors and activists and people who, want to make a difference in the world. And since you're the one funding these organizations, you should be the one deciding whether or not and how much we should be giving to these candidates and how much we should be investing in these campaigns. And so what we're going to do is we're going to interview these candidates, people that we think are worthy of at least the interview. And at the end of the interview, we're going to decide as an organization whether or not to support them, to give them some money for their campaign, to give them our endorsement. But we want to also hear from you. And we want to give you the opportunities, maybe some candidates you like, some candidates you don't like, to listen, understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to accomplish by running for office. And if you're on board with them, then support them directly, or support them through our website at Constitutional Rights PAC. And so that's what the candidate series is about. And look, welcome to the 2020 Constitutional Rights PAC candidate series. This is important, and we really need your support, and we need your participation. So please share this with your friends and family and contribute to these candidates who share your values. Thanks. All right, today we are going to interview a guy I'm very excited about. I've heard a lot about, especially in Liberty circles. It hasn't been a good year for Liberty candidates, but this gentleman, David Dudenhoefer, please, if I've screwed up your name, let me know. David Dudenhoefer is running in Michigan's 13th district against someone that I think a lot of our audience despises. And that is Rashida Tlaibatable. And you are a Liberty candidate that made it through the primary, and I'd love to talk to you about that as well. But you've lived in Detroit for over 25 years, 20 years of experience in the private sector. You're a political activist and advocate for liberty. I know you've worked on other campaigns in the past and with other Liberty organizations, and your constitutional positions are right in line with our PAC, Constitutional Rights PAC. And so what we're doing with this constitutional series, and just so you have an idea why we're doing this, I've been in politics for 20 plus years. I've been part of the inside game. I've walked candidates into other organizations like Club for Growth. Candidates have come to us, Club for Growth or Senate Conservatives Fund or whatever, where they're looking for money, they're looking for support, and they're looking for they're looking for an endorsement. And typically in that session, I'm sure you've sat through some of those. In that session, you have the ability to ask the candidate questions, find out what their positions are, find out how their campaign apparatus is going, how their fundraising is going, how they're going to win. Ask them some tough questions, make them defend their positions, and then they decide whether or not it's worth investing in them, right? So that's what we're going to do, except we're going to do it a little differently. We're not doing it behind closed doors. We're going to do this. We're going to live stream this. We're going to put this video up on our website at Constitutional Rights PAC, and we're going to let the people who fund our organization, because it's not our organization, it's the people who give us money that allow this organization to continue and to push the cause of liberty, that need to hear these answers and that need to hear these questions and ask these questions. So if you're watching on live stream, please ask the questions, and we'll try to get some of those questions in our interviews, right? So David, you are our inaugural candidate for the 2020 constitutional series. I hope you feel honored, and let's kick this off. So tell me about yourself. Tell me about your background, your professional background.
Yeah, so I've been in the private sector all my life. I've not worked in politics at all, mostly with people, sales, management. Right now currently I'm furloughed because of the pandemic, but was in the gaming industry. And so working with people. But for me, it was always kind of just, a great way to pay the bills, great insurance, but it allowed me to be able to do what I really love, which was to work with people in activist circles and really build an activist foundation in every local community around my area. And then eventually started to build outside of my area and really begin to travel the state, training people on how to hold their local governments accountable to their oath and to the rule of law. So I've spent the better part of since 2007 doing that. And that was after a presidential campaign that I got involved in, a guy by the name of Dr. Ron Paul. And the doctor cured my apathy. We've heard that over and over again, but it was very true. Prior to that campaign, I was really just kind of, on the sidelines. I was a normal, everyday person, just going to work, doing my thing, paying my bills. And when I heard his message, it was plain spoken and it rang true with me. And so much so that it turned me from a don't care into a care. And it got me off the couch. It got me inspired. It got me doing things. And that just kind of kept going. And then around about 2013, I would say several of us that stuck around inside the party as precinct delegates, we decided we would go a little bit further with it. And I was one of the ones. And so I ran for district chair for the 13th Congressional District Republicans. And I had won that race. And I've been serving in that capacity ever since. So that's a bit about my background with activism, a bit about my background, in the private sector. And then now, obviously, as chair and still an activist for liberty, I decided that this would be a good time to take on socialism, to take on tyranny with a true liberty message. And that's why I decided to run. I got really tired, and I think many of your supporters, your viewers would agree with me. We're tired of watching two homogenized candidates from both parties really just haggle over nonsense. This is an opportunity to see the two extremes and really compare the two. And I think when people hear the difference between what she's pushing and what I'm promoting, the choice couldn't be more clear. It's freedom all the way. And this is a message that people want to hear. They're hungry for. My challenge as a candidate in this district, and I've already been doing this as district chair, so I've already been establishing these relationships, but my challenge is to go into the places in Detroit and Inkster and Romulus, some of these places that Republicans have ignored or just not worked for years. And that's what we're going to do, and that's what we've been doing with this campaign.
Well, it's everything that you've said. Matter of fact, you've answered my first three questions, so I appreciate that. Why you're running for office and what got you politically active, and Ron Paul, did inspire a new group of people supporting and pushing for liberty, and we have to continue doing that. But the libertarian side of the Republican Party has had some issues with Trump. And some of them have, manifested in the Amash style and never Trump. And some of them have been the Rand Paul style. Hey, look, we support you where we agree, and I'm not afraid to call you out if we don't. Do you support the president?
Yeah, when the president is right, I'm going to support him. And when he's violating our rights under the Constitution, it's my job as a legislator, private sector citizen, whatever it is. It's our duty to hold our elected officials accountable. But for me, it doesn't have to be an either or. You know, when people are not doing what they're supposed to do and they're on your side, so to speak, or from your party, you know, you have an obligation to call that out, but there's a way to do it. And I think you get a lot further taking the Rand Paul style than you do the Amash style, because we see where Justin is, and Justin's a friend, you know, but you see where Rand is. So I think as long as you're not compromising your principles, and that's so important. We see so many candidates who talk the game, and then when they get in there, they compromise themselves because they're, you know, they're with the cabal, they're with the lobbyists, and you're hearing them all day.
Lost you for a second.
Easy to get manipulated that way. Lost you for a second.
There we go. All right, so you're back. You're back. Go. Okay. So
all right. So it's very easy to get manipulated.
Yeah, and so what do you see as Trump's signature accomplishment, and what are some of the things that you would stand against or have stood against him in his first term?
I think definitely his ability to, you know, work across party lines and work with people and go into demographics that he, you know, work with demographics that he hasn't traditionally Republicans have not worked with before. I think is a great accomplishment, like prison reform and like, you know, getting into the communities and the Black communities and really giving opportunities or paving the way for folks to create their own opportunities, which is even better. Those are some great accomplishments, and those aren't things that you can say that's a bill or that's a law. It's just the ability to work with folks. And I think that that's something that the president should be able to do, is you should be able to facilitate change through leadership and through, you know, through his own style or through his own willingness. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a bill or a law to do that. And I certainly think, you know, religious freedom, I think he's led on that. I think he's been the best example of a pro-life president, pro-Second Amendment president. These are things that, you know, this is red meat for a liberty person. And so he's demonstrated that. He's also not been perpetuating war. You know, this is something else that I think is key. He's done what other presidents have talked about but failed at, which is to really try to get us out of wars. And so, you know, I stand with him on those things. Where I would disagree is on trade policy. I'm still a little skeptical of some of the trade deals. And I'm skeptical of when he takes sides with, for example, in Venezuela, when he's getting involved in the internal affairs of other countries. Those things bother me because when you pick sides, it can backfire. Even though the intentions might be good, it can still backfire. And I still think that a non-interventionist foreign policy, that's a traditional libertarian position. It's the tradition of the founders. I think there's still a lot of, I think that's something that we should have stuck with. And I think the evidence is there that when we stray away from the non-interventionist policy, we see the ramifications of that, and it's not very good. It blows back at us. So those areas I would disagree with. But when you combine all of it, I still think he's miles better than Barack Obama. He's miles better than Bill Clinton. And so, you know, we have to embrace the good. And I think as activists, as citizens, as people inside of politics, it is our duty, it is our obligation to not only hold people accountable, but bring them back. You know, if they stray off, it's our duty to bring them back. And, you know, you don't accomplish that with hollering and calling people names and all that kind of thing, because I really do think that his intentions are good. Despite what the media will say, I think his intentions are good. I think he's just listening to a lot of different voices, and some of them are not pro-liberty. And so we've got to remind him of the liberty positions, and we also have to remind him of his proper role according to the Constitution and hold him to that. And I think we'll do, you know, really good. We'll get to where we want to be.
So you mentioned trade, right? And you know, you talk about you don't like his trade deals. Are you for multinational bureaucratic run trade deals like TPP or NAFTA, or do you support? free trade in terms of, you know, 1-to-1, you know, UK to United States, or, you know, Venezuela to the United States type of deals?
Yeah, free trade all the way. I do not like managed trade, government managed trade. They tend to micromanage. And I think when you hear the word fair trade, that expression, fair is really just fair to the one who's writing the deal. All right. But free trade is, it is what it is. Now, I think there's some complex issues inside of that, because people will talk about certain certain commodities that are more expensive overseas. And I think there's a lot to do with other elements, such as the type of currency that we're using, which contributes to inflation. So we have to look at those things. And I think there's very few people in politics that have the courage to connect the monetary system with our economy. And I think it's critical that we do that. And there's other. I always say, let's err on the side of free trade.
Good. I do agree with that. I think that's what Trump is trying to accomplish with these 1-to-1 deals. It keeps the bureaucrats out of it and just writes the basic rules of the road and lets businesses have commerce, free commerce. And I appreciate that you're honest, and there are some things you don't like about the president. That's fine. And I'm sure the president would think that's fine. The president and Rand, I believe, have created this really strong bond, because Rand stands up to him when he does, and he supports him when he thinks he should, right? And I think that, and he does it in a respectful manner, just like you said. So I do think that is the right approach. And there's enough people hating on Trump, orange man bad and all. Now, let's get into some meat and potato stuff. Obviously, there are some the riots and everything else, and people are bringing guns. Like in CHOP, we saw lots of BLM activists holding weapons. Nobody was out. None of the gun control crowds were out there. Bloomberg wasn't out there saying, "Oh, have you done background checks on these people?" So the gun control argument is always been one-sided. They don't want conservatives having guns, law-abiding conservatives having guns. But do you think there are any reasonable or acceptable limitations on the Second Amendment?
Thou shall not be infringed is pretty darn clear to me, and that's where it stands with me.
Thank God you said that, because I'd have to hang up if you said yes. Just be very clear.
Absolutely. That's, and I carry many times when I'm campaigning in the office, carry on a daily basis. You have to exercise that right or you lose it. And really, the Second Amendment defends the others. I believe that wholeheartedly. It is not about sport. It is not about hunting, although those are great things. It is about a free society defending itself against their servant government when they go astray. That is exactly what the Second Amendment is for. I believe that wholeheartedly. And if you want to own a flamethrower, that's up to you.
And there's a lot of hateful speech going on, right? Everybody keeps talking about hate speech. These riots. People are saying hateful things on the internet. Is hate speech protected by the Constitution, in your opinion?
Speech is speech. It's all perception. If you presume it to be hate in your mind, that could be hate to you. It could be neutral to somebody else. But speech is speech. And when we lose that, we lose ourselves. And we're already seeing that. And it's not just the verbal speech. It's our monuments. That's also a form of speech. And we cannot allow that to ever be undermined, and under any circumstances. We have to have our freedoms. And you just mentioned the first two are critical. So for me, that's a no compromise right there.
Good. So are you pro-life?
Also pro-life. And hear this too, and I'm getting tired of hearing this from some folks. They say you're libertarian, therefore you must be pro-choice. That's really just a cop-out or a way for somebody to manipulate the message. If you're pro-liberty, you're defending life. And you're defending life in the womb, because that is the true pro-liberty position. You cannot not defend life and be pro-liberty. So I just want to clear that up for folks that get confused about that.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I'm pro-life, and the thought of partial birth abortion, or as my governor, blackface baby killer we call him, said on an interview, after birth. If a baby is born alive after an abortion, that the doctor should make that decision. And of course we're totally against that. And it's like you said, there's a huge chasm now between the left and the right, and these things have to be spoken about, and spoken about eloquently, like you have, in terms of why you're pro-life.
And my wife and I are living it. I mean, we were surprised by an unexpected pregnancy this year, and there was no option, there was no thinking about it. This was a gift from God, really. And, the good Lord had a different plan for us. We were thinking next year, but it doesn't always work out that way. So, that's a gift, and you accept that. And then you live your life, and you're proud and you're happy to have what you have. I don't ever look at it as that's a choice for me. So, some people would.
And this election, of course, has been about law and order versus riots, right? How do you feel about warrantless seizures, and has there been overreach by not only the local police, but by the federal law enforcement? Is there anything that you would change in that vein, in terms of maybe getting some of our rights back in terms of privacy back in? What would you do in that situation?
Yeah, there's also going to be reforms at both levels, as you pointed out. We know that that's needed. I mean, I think everybody has experienced an overzealous patrol officer, from time to time, whether it's living in Michigan, which is still one of 2 states where officers are allowed to turn their lights off and hide in the medium to, trap folks in a, speeding ticket or what have you. So we've all experienced it at different levels. But that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Certainly, defund police is a ridiculous idea that my opponent is promoting. And, you needn't look any further than Detroit with Chief Craig, who's been, pro-gun. He's been pro-self-defense, which is critical in this neighborhood. But he's also implemented some of the ideas that these folks with defund claim that they want, such as neighborhood patrolling. We have our MPO officers, and we, have our meetings monthly. We have their cell phones. We're connected with them. We share information, and they're a part of the community. And crime has gone down as a result of that for the past 10 years since Chief Craig implemented those ideas. But certainly, no-knock warrants, stop and frisk, all of those things that are really violating people's civil liberties. Those things I would still rail against. And policing for profit. As an activist, we've spoken out against those things. But again, we don't want our officers gone. I mean, who's gonna patrol the neighborhoods? Especially if you have liberals that are out there and they're saying, okay, defund the police, get rid of the police, and also we want to take your guns. Well, now what? Basically, what they're creating is criminal empowerment zones. And that's something that I'm going to rail against every day, whether I'm, serving in public office or whether I'm an activist or a private citizen, because that's something that we all have to ensure that we have, is the safety in the communities. We have to have a better relationship with our officers and stop treating them like, some plague that's out there. And I think the relationship that we have with our officers is important. I also think that supporting our officers is important with things like mental care and, better non-lethal training or de-escalation training. And even the police chiefs would agree with that. So I think we can have reasonable changes, definitely not defund the police. If anything, invest more in our police.
So you win. You're sworn in as a member of Congress. One of the first most important votes that you're going to take in the next election is to select, if the Republicans win the House, the Speaker of the House or the minority leader in the House. So who is your first choice for Speaker
Thomas
of the
Massey.
House? Tom, that's a good answer. That's a good answer.
They call us softball.
There you go, Thomas Massey. Now, Thomas Massey doesn't run and and you see, there's lots and lots and lots of pressure. I can tell you an example of a member of Congress who swore to me in one of these interviews, right, that he would not vote for Boehner under any circumstance. And we were obviously anti-Boehner, and he got in office, and he brought in a chief of staff. They tapped him on the shoulder. They said, "Hey, you need this guy. He's going to show you around." He got a chief of staff that had been on the Hill forever, and that chief of staff got in his ear and said, "Hey, you need to vote for Boehner." If that scenario is true, are you going to vote for someone so that you can get a good committee seat, or you could, be invited to the good fundraiser, get the good list, or you can raise money for your reelection, or are you going to stand and be a little more vulnerable and still vote for the leader or the speaker? And remind you this: one of the reasons why we're doing this, and we're doing this live stream, and we're doing this on camera, is because I want your answer on record here.
Right.
Are you going to vote for the party insider, or are you going to vote for the liberty or constitutional guy?
I'm going to vote for the liberty person who best represents our Constitution, who takes it seriously, takes their oath seriously, and is representing the interests of not only their constituents, but of everybody in the country if you're going to be the speaker. And I think that that's important because we've strayed so far away when we compromise ourselves, even in the slightest bit. And I think that if we can demonstrate through somebody standing on their principle that it's right to do that, then other people will follow. So I don't want to be the follower. I want to be the guy that leads so that other people will follow my example. And the way that I think about the job is that we've gotten so far away from the basic principle that it's government's job to secure our rights, and it's our job as legislators to apply the law equally and to do that by defending liberty. So we've gotten so far away from just that foundation that any of these other ideas or who we support or compromising on this one little thing because it's going to be good for the party and good for us down the road, it's like, to me, it's like building a structure on a foundation of quicksand. How long is that structure going to last? So if you can't even get your foundation right, you can forget all these other ideas. So for me, it starts with every vote, reading those bills. If any part of that bill violates our rights, if any part of that bill is detracting from individual liberty, it's a no vote. I don't care how good the title is. I don't care how good some of the other stuff is. If any part of that is wrong for us and violates our rights, it's no. And so true for somebody that's running for a leadership position. If they are not truly defending the rights and the liberties of each and every one of us, and they're not practicing that every day, then they are not a leader in my mind. And I cannot in good conscience support somebody like that for a leadership role.
And again, if you win, what committee assignments will you be seeking?
I don't care if it's dog catcher. Because, the thing about that I've learned, and actually I learned this through Massey, was I think he did a documentary called The Swamp. And he talked about the fact that you, as a legislator, they expect you to pay to be on some of these, what they call A committees, some of these high-profile committees. Well, I'm not going to use my donor money to pay to be on a committee. That's just not going to happen. People who donated to me donated, first of all, to get rid of Rashida Tlaib, and secondly, to support somebody who's going to defend their rights, not to pay off some, lobbyist or some, PAC or some House leadership committee who's just going to turn around and take that money and support somebody who's going to compromise. So then we're right back to square one again. So, of all the committees, you can put me on some of the smaller committees. They consider it smaller. But I think like roads and bridges and taking care of our infrastructure, which I think they consider it like a B committee. But that's important to my constituents because these roads here in Detroit are awful. So I would just assume go on a committee like that. Veteran affairs. I mean, our veterans need to be taken care of, and they, you can argue the point that, yeah, we think about them when it comes to VA hospital and those type of situations, but we don't think about them in everyday life. So I could see myself on a committee like that, and they consider that a C committee. That's the lowest committee on the totem pole. The very people that went out and fought, bled, and died to give us these freedoms, they consider that the lowest of importance on the totem pole of committees. And I don't. I think that's very important. So So you can put me on them small committees. I'm happy with it. I'm certainly not going to pay for these high profile committees. Not a chance.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And like I said, you want to serve your community. That's what you're there to do. You're there to serve the community that you're representing, Michigan 13. And sometimes members of Congress, when they get elected, they forget that. They like the black tie circuit and all the dinners and cocktail parties, and they forget where they came from. And so, I hope when you get elected that you remember that you're there to represent your community.
Larry, one other anecdotal point on that is I've come from the position of an activist since I've got involved in politics. So I'm used to being let down by these folks. I'm used to these folks trying to bribe me to get me out of the way, threatening me to get me out of the way. If you're a good activist, you're going to experience those things, and I have. So all that does is fire me up to fight back even harder, and that's just my attitude.
Well, we're in COVID season, right? COVID season, riot season, COVID season, riot season. Imagine the riots start again, and you don't hear about COVID. So now we're in riot season. I don't know, but a lot of folks like yourself are furloughed or laid off or in between jobs, and they still want to help, and they still may have some money to support your campaign. So the next couple of questions are why should they invest in your campaign? How are you able to win? I've always thought that a successful fundraising campaign has to have three things: a good guy or a bad guy. And you certainly got a bad guy in your race, and I think you're showing yourself to be a good guy in this interview. You need something that people are talking about, right? And obviously 2020 people are talking about it. It's important. It's an important race, probably the most important race in our lifetime. And that's not just hyperbole. I believe this is the most important election in our lifetime. And you need to be able to do something of value with that money. So are you able to win? And so I want to ask you a couple of questions about your campaign.
Yep.
First, how many votes do you think you need to win?
Based on what she got last time and based on what I think her vote will probably slightly increase just because she's a little bit more known in the Democrat circles. But when I say increase, that's just increasing with the Democrat voters. So let me break it down for you the way I've gotten to know this district. There's about 525,000 registered voters in this district out of 699,000 residents. Okay, so some of those are children, some of those folks cannot vote. Of that 525, the Democrat at its best was John Conyers, got 199. Tlaib got 165 2 years ago. So I expect that she'll be somewhere between 165 and 199 or somewhere in there. The Republican, who typically never works the district, the Republicans haven't worked this district in decades, typically gets about 60 to 80,000. The Libertarian will get about 10,000. Now, the Libertarians purposely did not run anybody this year for obvious reasons. But that still leaves about 150,000 votes somewhere in there of people who are registered but just don't vote. Now, I don't know if they're not voting because they just don't feel like they have somebody out there for them, or are they leaning more right and they just don't feel like the Republican is really trying or working it. I want to give them a reason to vote. Now, I'm not a Donald Trump, but Donald Trump did tap into a lot of don't cares and turn them into cares. So my job is to tap into the don't cares and turn them into cares. And when we do that, I believe, well, I don't believe, I know it statistically, we have the votes to win. They're there. Statistically, they are there to win. But we have to be able to reach them. And I'm not talking about just, run an ad or, get on television. We got to get to where they are. It's the 21st century now. We've got to get them on their platforms. We've got to seek them out where they're at. And that's what I intend to do with the support that I'm getting. And we've gotten a lot of support across the nation, some 9,000 donors across the nation so far for a guy that's never run for office before, but just has a strong liberty message. And I think that speaks. So when you support my campaign, what you're supporting is not only the fact that I'm running against a very bad candidate, in Rashida Tlaib, but my presence also helps the top of the ticket, which is Donald Trump. And in Michigan, he won by about 10,000 votes, and we need to increase that. My presence will do that. It also helps John James, by talking about the things that he and I will agree on. And so between John and myself and being out there and running those two parallel campaigns, we're helping the ticket. We're also reaching out to voters who have not been reached out to before, and we're building lists. We're building volunteers. We're building money that we can use. Hopefully, if I run a truly conservative campaign, and I have been so far, I intend to have money at the end of this, and we can invest in the Farm League candidates for the future. As district chair, I've always thought that way. We have to build the farm team, and we have to build the bench so that they build name recognition so that they can run for the bigger offices in the future. And that is so important, in particular in the Detroit-Wayne County area, because not just with the federal races, but at the state level, I can't tell you how many times we've had great candidates. Most recently, the Attorney General, an anti-Common Core State Board of Education candidate, John James, the last time he ran. We're all leading in Michigan right up until Detroit-Wayne County came in, and then they lose late at night. So my presence in being here not only helps this race, which is so vitally important, and we are here to win, but it helps the top of the ticket, it helps build the bench for the future, and it helps the statewide races. So it's, for me being here and you supporting me, it's win-win for everybody, and it's building for the future as well.
That's a great answer, and I appreciate that you are looking out for for the top of the ticket and for the Senate race, and it is important. And I believe you're in a race that typically the party apparatus would turn heads, and they're not looking at you. They may be this year because Michigan is one of those swing states that we need to win. But for the most part, they'll be like, he doesn't have a shot. We're not going to invest in him. But that's the wrong attitude. You got to invest in candidates, and you got to fight for every single vote, particularly in a presidential year. So that is absolutely a very good reason to invest in the Dudes campaign. So the other question I have here is, do you have a ground game? What are you doing on the ground?
Yeah, so we built up volunteers, not just this year. I've gotten to know so many people, as I said, from being an activist going back to 2007, and then leading Michigan Campaign for Liberty beginning in about 2009, 2010. My partner and I, his name is Tony, we would travel the state, and we would, on Saturdays, we would train activists. So we've gotten to know citizen activists over that period of time, and when I ran, they naturally wanted to come and help, and they're coming from in the district, out of the district. And then, of course, as this campaign continues to roll on, new folks are taking an interest in my message, and they come on board and they want to help as well. So what we have right now is the state party, although they haven't funded me with, monetarily, they are allowing me to use their application for voter file, which is, if you ever used I-360, that costs some money. So I'm able to use their system for free. So to me, that's kind of like a donation. And so we use that system. We put the volunteers on that. We do a training every week, but anytime you want to come in, we'll train you in our office. And by the way, we have a campaign office. I know that's, in this day and age, maybe not as necessary, but optically in this district, it's the first time a Republican's had a physical office going back 30 years. And I think that really does, psychologically, it helps people who've never voted for us before for the party to say, hey, they're here. They're planted middle of the district. Those folks can come in, they can train, they can learn, then we put them out in the field. And all we ask is that they take care of their neighborhood if they're from the district. If they're out of the district, we'll put them in a high turnout area. We've got maps on the wall. We can, map out where we put people in the past, where we need to repeat with me, or where we haven't covered it all, and then we put them where they need to be. And our mantra is right on the wall above the maps. It's win at the door, and I really believe that. That's where the victory is at. You can have all the money, you can do all the ads, but if you're not listening to your constituents, if you're not communicating with them, you're missing the election. So we're doing those things on the ground. We're also putting together events where we can interact with folks. I've done a viewing of No Safe Spaces, and that went off, really good. A lot of folks came in that I'd never met before, and we got to share that time, and it was a little socializing time as well. We've done Second Amendment events. We're also contemplating right now auctioning off an AR-15 perhaps, so stay tuned for that. So we're going to have some fun with this. And
You should auction off 9mm ammo.
yeah, exactly. I tell you what, I went a couple of days ago to try to get some because I went up north and they didn't have any. We were limited to one box, and now there just isn't any. So that's going to be an issue. But also, too, getting into the city, it's a different type of event in the city when you're interacting with voters. Churches are a big deal in the inner city, and so I've already reached out to folks that are in leadership positions, as district chair, and again now as a candidate. So I've already built up some relationships, and now I'm just capitalizing on those. And people in the city, they like doing dinners or like barbecues in the park, and it's a great way for the community to come out. And so we plan on doing more of those. And those are the types of things that we're doing for the ground game.
Is Rashida Tlaib beatable? Do the people there have an affinity towards her? Are you willing to go negative against her? And what's your nickname for
her? I hadn't really thought of a nickname for her. We usually use the mantra replace Rashida. I really don't want to attack people personally because that just brings you down. I mean, that just makes you look like you really don't have anything to talk about. What I do is attack the policy, and her policy is socialism. And that is completely anti-American. It's completely contrary to what we stand for as Americans. And so we go after the policy. In terms of is she beatable? Absolutely. I think, as I said before, there's 525,000 registered voters. If she only got 165,000 last time, I doubt she's going to get another 300,000. So clearly there's something that those folks are looking for that she's not offering. And she's offering the same thing this year that she offered 2 years ago. So that's not going to change. So our job is to go in there and court those voters and show them that the message of liberty is a more sustainable, more inclusive solution to their everyday problems, and they will come our way.
Well, that's a good question. So how do you feel about these mask mandates that the coronavirus, that your governor and several of the governors across the country have issued, Republican and Democrat?
Yeah, so I completely oppose the lockdowns, completely oppose the mask mandates. I think it's ridiculous to listen to Joe Biden talk about defending liberty in one breath and then insisting that he's going to have a nationwide mask mandate in the next breath. Completely hypocritical. So this campaign is not just an opportunity to go after Rashida Tlaib. I've also used our campaign office and used this campaign as an opportunity to support local activist groups here in Michigan. There's one group in particular that is doing a Recall Whitmer petition. I'm supporting that inside the campaign office, and on my window I have a big sign that reads Recall Whitmer petitions here. Also, we're doing there's a group called Unlock Michigan, and they are going after to repeal the old 1945 Public Act that gives her those emergency powers to begin with, because it stands in contradiction to the amended 1976 version. And I know that's a little bit deep in the weeds for some of your viewers, but it's a way that we can strip those emergency powers from her. And we're doing it through the legislative pathway, which means when we get the signatures that we need, and we have 180 days to get those signatures, and in just about 60 or 70 days, somewhere in there, we've already collected 200,000. So we're well on our way to getting them. Once we get the signatures, it goes before the state House and the state Senate, which we have Republican majorities. And once passed, it's veto proof. So we are going to get our freedoms back that way. That mask mandate will go away, along with her other 150 executive orders that she has signed. So I'm doing those things to support our local activists. I'm not just talking about it. I'm putting my money where my mouth is.
Oh, you're multitasking. That's an interesting thing right there. Right? That you're still, you can become a candidate and you're still an activist.
Absolutely.
And an activist for your community and your state. I think she's done great harm to the state of Michigan. And now of course it's everybody's back to school time. How do you feel about the schools opening in person?
Get them back to school. Absolutely. They need that structure. It's been demonstrated, that they cannot spread this thing. They are not, getting infected and getting sick the way that, some folks that are susceptible to any illness, really. I mean, if you're of age and you have other issues, you're going to be susceptible to flus. The flu could kill you. Common colds could kill you. I just don't think we need to be shutting down society over something that was so astronomically over predicted as to what this would do, that the predictive models were just so far off. And obviously, this has been used for political gain. I mean, my own governor used the opportunity to, go on the national late night talk show circuit to promote herself, because we all know she wanted to be the vice president, the nominee anyway. And so she clearly is using this to score political points. Now, I have some residents that honestly believe that, they purposely tank the economy to make Trump look bad. And, whether you think that's a conspiracy or not, there are constituents who think that because of the track record of some politicians, in the past, when they went after the president on Russia, when they went after the president on impeachment, and they just think that this is like the last ditch effort to knock him out. And there are, citizens that really believe that.
Well,
And
so
so,
do you believe in the deep state?
oh, I believe in the deep state, but the point is, the more important point is that the people I'm talking to do, and I represent those people. So you and I can have our opinions, but what's important is, the 700,000 residents and what they're thinking. Now, not all of them think that, obviously. I don't want to exaggerate the point here, but it's just that I'm hearing this over and over again. Clearly, government is doing something wrong. If that's not the intent, clearly they're doing something wrong. And I think when you force people into something, clearly that's violating their liberties. And you're taking a situation that we're all supposed to be supposedly working towards a solution, and you're exacerbating the negatives of the situation. You're taking a negative situation and you're making it worse. And the example is that there's other medical conditions now that people have because they weren't able to get access. We were told to stay out of the hospital, stay out of the medical facilities while this was going on. They wasted millions of dollars in building a 1,000 bed facility at the old Cobo Hall, and they ended up using 39 beds. If China, can build an entire hospital in a matter of days, then my God, this country, if we really needed that space, we could have done the same thing. We did not have to waste the taxpayer dollars on something that clearly was not needed. Now, my wife is in the medical profession. My wife was one of the ones that was furloughed from an emergency room job during a pandemic, and then signed up to help out at one of the many nursing homes that was hit hard. And she can attest to the policies that Governor Whitmer put forward contributed to needless death, suffering that didn't have to happen. And it wasn't just our seniors. Many of these Medicaid facilities were housing folks that were in their 40s and 50s that were just there for rehabilitative services, which she deemed non-essential. So now you're in a situation where you're not getting the rehab. You're laying in your own feces and urine for days on end because they've cut other services out that they deemed non-essential. Then you develop flu, and then you get worse, and then they're mixing in the COVID patients, and now you get COVID, and now you're dead. So you went in there for a simple knee operation, and you're being wheeled out dead. And I think we need to hold her accountable to that, because the blood is on her feet. I put that right on her feet for her policies. And so this is the reason why we have to, be sensible about these, actions that we take, like returning the kids back to school. You look at Germany, you look at Denmark, you look at Sweden. They've already sent the kids back to school, and they're doing just fine. Are our kids going to be any different? And if there's teachers that are worried, then we can figure that out. We can figure out something with that. They can wear a mask if they absolutely have to, or some other type of physical distancing, but we have to get the kids back to school.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. You definitely will be supported and endorsed by the Constitutional Rights PAC, and we are going to encourage our followers and our donors to do the same and to support you. We're going to have a page up on our site to support your candidacy directly, and any contribution that goes to our page, you will get 100% of the contributions, including the credit card fee, as a pass-through contribution from our PAC to you. I appreciate the time again, and your answers were spectacular. It's going to be, unfortunately, you were the first candidate in this constitutional candidate series, so you've set a pretty high bar for everybody else. And but it's a good thing, and we need to continue to fight for liberty. We need to win Michigan, and we need to win your district. We need you in the Congress. So
Absolutely.
I appreciate it, and I thank you. And for everybody else, it's Dude for Congress, number 4, right? DudeForCongress.com.
Correct. And thank you, Larry, and thank you for what you're doing, because what you're doing is important as well. It also brings awareness not only to the campaigns, but it shows people that there's a structure in place that they can trust, and they need to. They need to have that. So thank you, too.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. And cutting off.